The fight over Donald Trump's Supreme Court pick today. Republicans giving Brett Kavanaugh's accuser an ultimatum. Talk to us by Monday or we'll move forward without your testimony. But Christine Blasey Ford, she is saying she wants the FBI to investigate her claim that Brett Kavanaugh sexually assaulted her when they were in high school before she testifies. Kavanaugh denies the incident even happened. And this morning, the one person who could order the FBI to investigate said this.
Well, it would seem that the FBI really doesn't do that. They've investigated.
They would if you asked them to, Mr. President.
They've investigated about 6 times before, and it seems that they don't do that. I would let the senators take their course. Let the senators do it. They're doing a very good job. They've given tremendous amounts of time. They've already postponed a major hearing.
That is not true. It is the president. He absolutely could have the FBI investigate. It is what George Bush did during the time of Clarence Thomas and Anita Hill. And if you're thinking an investigation, my God, it'll be Robert Mueller style months and months. The Anita Hill FBI investigation took 3 days. Today, 2 former classmates coming forward, and they've got very different stories. Patrick Smith, who graduated from Kavanaugh's prep school, says he has no knowledge of that party after a report identifying him as being there. In the meantime, one of Ford's classmates says the incident did happen and that it was spoken about for days afterwards in school, although she says she did not hear about it firsthand. Democrats, no surprise, saying these kinds of claims are exactly what the FBI should investigate. And like I said, it is something the FBI has done before. In 1991, specifically, the White House directed the FBI to investigate Anita Hill's allegations against Clarence Thomas. President George H.W. Bush's team saying it issued the order promptly the very day it learned of the accusation. Thomas saying this in his opening statement.
The first I learned of the allegations by Professor Anita Hill was on September 25th, 1991. When the FBI came to my home to investigate her allegations.
And as I said, 3 days, 3 days. I completely understand the midterms are coming, the importance of the politics. 3 days, we're talking about a judgeship that will last a lifetime. And those 3 days ended with a White House report that the allegations were unfounded. This morning, Anita Hill gave her advice to the Senate Judiciary.
My advice is to push the pause button on this hearing, get the information together, bring in the experts, and put together a hearing that is fair, that is impartial, that is not biased by politics or by myth, and bring this information to the American public.
With me now, former counsel to the mayor of New York City, Maya Wiley. She also worked as a civil prosecutor in the Southern District of New York. My old friend Margaret Carlson, columnist for the Daily Beast, who has a new article in the Daily News about this very topic. And Frank Figliuzzi, former assistant director for counterintelligence at the FBI. Maya, to you first. The president was clearly, and let's make it clear, not being honest. I'm not being biased when he said, I can't do it, it's up to these guys. That's not the case. The president could order an FBI investigation, and it is not something that would necessarily take months.
It would not necessarily take months. He absolutely can order it and should, because in this case, we've already seen, even without the FBI reopening the background check, that there are people starting to come forward saying that they have information relevant to the case. Because the fact that you have a classmate saying, people were talking about this, tells you that there's a way to identify whether there are other people who had knowledge of what happened at that party. And certainly that is extremely relevant to judge the veracity, the truthfulness of someone who is going to sit in one of the most powerful seats in the land.
Frank, transparency would certainly help the honest. If there was an FBI investigation, it doesn't necessarily support what Professor Ford says. Why would the president not want to do that? Why wouldn't Brett Kavanaugh not want that? If Brett Kavanaugh is telling the truth, the woman from the classmate who says this was spoken about at school for days, she wasn't actually at the party. If there was an FBI investigation opened, they could ask those questions to people who were there.
It looks like the only person asking for an independent, objective investigation is the victim. And that's disturbing. So what is it that people are afraid of? Are they afraid of what the FBI might find? Are they afraid that they would lose control of the facts, that they would not be able to shape the outcome of their hearing? So the White House absolutely could ask the FBI to intervene. It's the Federal Bureau of Investigation. They investigate for a living. In particular, they have specialists who interview sexual assault victims for a living. They do it right, they do it privately, and they get results. Then we'd get additional witnesses involved. We would determine whether or not there was a party or not. And then all of that could be presented to the committee for a finding of credibility and veracity. That's not the Bureau's job in this case, but absolutely it could be done, and in my opinion, it should be done. The Bureau should be allowed to finish their background investigation.
But in terms of fact-finding, Margaret, to Frank's point, Professor Ford, the victim, if she's not telling the truth, then Brett Kavanaugh would be a victim here. Shouldn't he be calling for an investigation? It doesn't mean it'll take months, because that would clear him. Otherwise, we're going to walk into Monday with a he said, she said. And the one person who Christine Ford is saying was in the room, Mark Judge, is siding with Brett Kavanaugh, yet he's unwilling to testify. So if Brett Kavanaugh is telling the truth, shouldn't he sound the alarm and say, let's open the textbook and show you what's inside?
He will have a cloud hanging over him if he doesn't, and that he doesn't want an investigation, which could be done in a matter of days, is very telling to me. And that she wants one, so that, you know, if without one, we will be no further ahead except to see her demeanor. We know Judge Kavanaugh's. Than we are now, which is she says one thing and he says another. She's asking for an FBI investigation that may or may not end up supporting her version of events. He does not want to take that chance. He's following the Trump playbook, which is deny, deny, deny. And there's a witness in plain sight that she revealed, who happens to be a good friend of Brett Kavanaugh's, who wrote about him in the book that makes Georgetown Prep sound like one big keg party. You know, he had an alcohol problem. He talks about, you know, striking a gong, using women to strike a gong, and colossal manhood and its beauty. So it does sound like he would be a witness to every party that happened, since he was a party guy. There he is. He could be called. That, by the way, wouldn't even take the 3 days it took for Anita Hill. It would take 1 day.
Yes, it was Mark Judge who was writing about the beauty of, I think it was uncontrolled male passion. You got to be some kind of sad sack to be thinking about that, sir. But Margaret, you know politics better than any of us. When you say Brett Kavanaugh is going to have a cloud hanging over him, does he actually care? Mitch McConnell doesn't give two hoots that he's got a cloud hanging over him, over Merrick Garland. For him, that's a win. He's about to get 2 Supreme Court justices in place. Cloud schmoud, they just want the seats.
Well, Mitch McConnell is about, you know, exercising the raw, brute force of the majority. You know, it bothers me that I gave Mitch McConnell some benefit of the doubt a few months back when he said, I believe the women. Do you remember that, Stephanie? This is during Roy Moore. But yes. It turns out he just didn't want Roy Moore in the Senate because he's not believing this woman. And everything that's come out of every Republican's mouth, other than, say, Senator Susan Collins and the guys resigning, Flake and Corker, has been to dismiss Christine Ford and to elevate Brett Kavanaugh. Every single word. And this idea that by asking for a couple more days, she's asking for a huge privilege after, you know, as they would have it, they've given her so much already. How dare she ask for this?
We have to remind our audience, when you mentioned Susan Collins, it was Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski who both called for Al Franken to step down, and we all remember he didn't get due process. What happens if Ford decides she's not going to appear? This vote is going to go on anyway?
You know, they could decide to do that. I think it's a huge travesty because really the important principle to uphold here is the public trust. We're talking about the public trust in people who hold some of the most powerful positions. A Supreme Court justice has the ability with his, in this case his, if he were to be confirmed, 8 other colleagues to actually say to Congress or the president, no, you can't, or yes, you can. So to not actually have a full process to understand whether or not you have someone who will and has upheld the law, to know whether or not you have someone who is truthful and who is not subject to actually being manipulated is important.
But let's get out of the philosophical travesty and get into the brute force of the vote. Does she need to show up on Monday, whether it's a public hearing or a private one, to stop this?
Well, I would argue that number one, obviously they have the ability to subpoena her, right? They could.
They're not going to. They don't want her to show up.
They don't want her to show up because they've already said this will give us a pass. I think the point is, if they go ahead and say she didn't show up, therefore we will ignore the fact that, by the way, we have other people who say they have facts and information relevant to this, and we're not even calling them because some of them have come forward. I think they've actually demonstrated to the public that we are not actually interested. You also have senators who've already said they don't believe her. Now, why would she voluntarily come forward without having the benefit, and to your point, not knowing what the outcome would be, but the benefit of a neutral, nonpartisan background check by experts who know exactly how to get to facts? Why?
And I just say to those senators, the truth will set you free. If this woman is an opportunist and a liar, have an investigation. Prove it. And just in, a new statement from Ford's lawyer saying, quote, the committee's stated plan to move forward with a hearing that has only 2 witnesses is not fair or a good faith investigation. There are multiple witnesses whose names have appeared publicly and should be included in any proceeding. Frank, what do you think of that?
Stephanie, here's the one thing I think that would actually get the FBI involved, because the White House isn't interested in this. Kavanaugh himself needs to come out and tell the White House, I want you to ask for the FBI's involvement. That will get the job done here. And as has been said, I'd put this at 2 weeks or less for investigating the known facts and talking to people. That would put Kavanaugh, if all goes well for him, that would put him right in his chair in the Supreme Court for the first week of October, for the start of the new term. This works out beautifully. He needs to come out, if he's got nothing to be afraid of, ask the White House to order the FBI's involvement.
2 weeks or less. This morning, the president was saying how sorry he feels for Brett Kavanaugh and his family. If Brett Kavanaugh is telling the truth here, an FBI investigation would support him and support that, and his children wouldn't have to hear all of this nonsense and a character assassination if it's not warranted. Last point, Margaret?
Stephanie, Brett Kavanaugh will be like Justice Clarence Thomas, who, by many women is suspected of being a perjurer. And does he want to be another one on the Supreme Court, not having brought to some conclusion what happened
Margaret,
that night?
There could be a whole lot of women who don't like Clarence Thomas, but he's got the job.
Lifetime.
It's a lifetime appointment, but, we're losing trust in our institutions. And this is another case that's going to erode that trust even further.
Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.